Karen called the cops on my lemonade stand, so I pranked her with a fake lawsuit. I just wanted to sell some damn lemonade, that's all. Nothing illegal, nothing outrageous. Just a simple childhood dream. A table, a pitcher, some cups, and a poorly drawn sign that read, "Fresh lemonade, $1," in questionable handwriting. But no, because my neighbor, Karen, the queen of all things miserable, was lurking. And she was always lurking. I should have seen it coming. I should have known the second I set up shop on the sidewalk in front of my house that Karen would materialize from the shadows, like some sort of neighborhood dementor, ready to suck the joy out of my afternoon. And sure enough, 5 sales in, with my first glorious $5 bill sitting proudly in my tip jar, I heard the dreaded sound. The high-pitched, nasally screech of the suburban tyrant. "Excuse me, but what do you think you're doing?" I sighed. Here we go. I looked up, and there she was, standing at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, mouth pursed in a disapproving scowl so tight I was convinced it could create its own gravitational pull. I smiled as politely as I could. "Selling lemonade?" Her eyes flicked to my sign, then to my neatly arranged cups, then to my pure, innocent face. "This is illegal," she declared, her voice dripping with the same self-importance as someone who had just personally discovered the cure for cancer. I blinked. "Selling lemonade?" "Yes." She huffed, stepping closer like she was preparing for battle. "You can't just set up a business on a public sidewalk. Do you have a permit for this?" I stared at her. "I'm 12, she scoffed. "That's no excuse for breaking the law." I was about to explain to her like a rational human being that lemonade stands had been around since the dawn of civilization, probably, when she did the most Karen thing possible. She pulled out her phone and called the cops on a lemonade stand. I watched in horror as she actually filed a noise complaint over my extremely non-noisy operation, dramatically emphasizing that I was illegally selling beverages without a license. I expected the cops to laugh at her, to tell her to get a life, maybe even fine her for wasting their time. But no, because apparently my town has nothing better to do. An actual patrol car rolled up 10 minutes later, lights flashing like I was running a full-fledged criminal empire out of my front yard. Officer Davis, one of the only decent people on the force, stepped out, looking deeply exhausted before he even approached me. He adjusted his belt, exhaled through his nose, and muttered, "What's going on here?" Karen immediately sprang into action. "Finally! This child is conducting an illegal operation." I opened my mouth to protest, but she kept going. "They don't have a food permit. They don't have a business license. They're selling unregulated beverages in a residential zone. What if someone gets food poisoning?" Officer Davis looked at me, then at my plastic pitcher of Country Time lemonade mix, then back at me. I stared at him, wide-eyed, hoping he would understand the absolute insanity of this situation. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Kid, I'm supposed to tell you that, technically, she's right about the permit thing." I gasped. "You're joking." He gave me a deeply apologetic look. "I wish I was." Karen smirked, her power trip reaching dangerous levels. "You see? It's against the law." I looked at the cop. "So you're shutting me down?" Officer Davis sighed again. "Look, I'm not going to arrest you for selling lemonade, but he should," Karen cut in. "If the law is the law, then it should be enforced." And that's when I snapped. I wasn't just going to accept this. I wasn't just going to let Karen, the fun-hating gremlin, ruin my lemonade stand. No, Karen wanted to play dirty. I was about to play dirty right back. For the next 3 days I plotted. I studied Karen. I learned her routines. I noted her deepest weaknesses, like a chaotic little scientist preparing for the ultimate experiment in revenge. And finally, after careful calculations, I devised the perfect plan. I was going to prank Karen into thinking she was being sued for shutting down my lemonade stand. I spent an entire afternoon creating the most official-looking legal document in history. It had everything. A fake law firm name. Henderson and Green, LLPA threatening subject line. Notice of impending lawsuit. Lots of complicated legal jargon I copied from the internet. A massive number written in bold. Damages sought, $75,000. Then, with the help of my older cousin Jake, who was an aspiring actor with way too much free time, I delivered the letter directly to Karen's house. And, oh my God, it was beautiful. The moment Karen saw the official-looking envelope, her soul left her body. Jake, who was fully committed to his role, handed it to her with perfectly rehearsed lawyer energy, saying, "This is a legal notice regarding your recent actions against my client. You are strongly advised to seek legal counsel." Karen took the letter with shaking hands, her face immediately turning pale as she frantically ripped it open. I watched from behind a tree, barely holding in my laughter, as her eyes darted across the totally fake lawsuit, her breathing getting heavier by the second. "This is insane!" she shrieked, flipping through the pages. This can't be legal. $75,000? Jake, maintaining his Oscar-worthy performance, gave her a sympathetic yet firm look. "You may be able to settle out of court, but that's between you and my client." Karen's eye twitched. I need to talk to someone about this." Jake gave her a deeply serious nod. "You should. You have 3 days to respond before we escalate this further." Then, without breaking character, he turned on his heel and walked away. "And Karen?" Karen panicked. Within hours, Karen had gone nuclear. She called the HOA president. She called the town clerk. She tried calling the police again, only to be told that this was a civil matter and they wouldn't get involved. She even called a real lawyer, who, according to Mrs. Delgado, laughed her off the phone. For 2 whole days, Karen was an absolute wreck. She was losing sleep. She stopped harassing people. She actually avoided me. And then, finally, on day 3, she did what I had dreamed of seeing for years. She marched over to my house, looking completely defeated, and muttered the sweetest words I had ever heard. "I apologize for shutting down your lemonade stand." I smiled, innocently. "That's all I wanted, Karen." Karen was unraveling. For 2 days, she had been in full-blown meltdown mode, scrambling to make sense of the fake lawsuit I had dropped into her lap. The neighborhood was buzzing with glorious gossip, and every time I caught a glimpse of her through my window, she looked 1 step away from a complete breakdown, and I was enjoying every second of it. Karen had spent years making the neighborhood miserable, filing complaints over the smallest infractions, demanding that people follow rules that didn't even exist, and calling the cops over things as ridiculous as a festival decoration being too scary for the community aesthetic. Now she was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. And the best part? She still had no idea that the whole thing was fake. The first sign that Karen was losing it came when she started going door to door, trying to recruit allies. I first heard about it from my neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, who wasted no time texting me the second Karen left her porch. "Mrs. Delgado, Karen just tried to get me to sign a petition to protect the community from lemonade-related litigation." I wheezed. I could barely type through my laughter. "Me, you're lying, Mrs. Delgado. I swear on my grandkids. She thinks this is part of a larger legal conspiracy." I nearly fell off my bed. Karen wasn't just scared. She was convincing herself that there was a full-scale legal battle looming on the horizon. This was beyond anything I could have hoped for. I needed to see this firsthand. So I grabbed my bike and took a slow, casual ride around the block, keeping a close eye on Karen's desperate mission. Sure enough, there she was, marching up to houses, waving her petition in the air like it was the Declaration of Independence. Most people politely shut their doors in her face. Some listened, purely for the entertainment value. And one, Greg, the old retired Marine who had spent years arguing with Karen over his perfectly legal backyard fire pit, pretended to sign the petition and instead wrote "Lemonade Freedom Forever" in giant letters. Karen stormed away fuming, and Greg gave me a wink when he saw me watching. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. But the real magic happened at the HOA meeting that night. Normally, HOA meetings were an unbearable mess of bureaucratic nonsense. People arguing about grass height regulations, complaints about dogs barking at unreasonable volumes, and debates over whether holiday decorations should be restricted to an agreed-upon color palette. But this time Karen hijacked the entire meeting. I sat near the back, blending into the crowd, while Karen stood at the front, holding her ridiculous petition and addressing the room like she was unveiling a government scandal. "We need to talk about the legal threat facing our neighborhood," she announced dramatically. The HOA president, Mr. Wilkes, rubbed his temples. "Karen, what are you talking about?" Karen slammed the petition onto the table. A child was allowed, without any permits or regulations, to operate a rogue lemonade business right under our noses. And now, because I did my civic duty and reported the situation, I am facing a frivolous lawsuit for damages that could bankrupt me. A murmur spread through the room. Greg, my personal hero, raised a hand. What exactly were the damages? Karen's eye twitched. Emotional distress, harassment, financial retaliation. Someone snickered. Mrs. Delgado Fake coughed into her hand to hide her laughter. The HOA president sighed deeply, looking more exhausted than ever. Karen, we can't get involved in personal legal matters. Karen gasped so loudly you'd think she had just been personally betrayed by the Constitution itself. So you're just going to let our neighborhood become a lawless wasteland where children can run businesses unchecked and weaponize the court system against concerned citizens? Greg muttered under his breath. God, I wish. At this point, I was physically shaking with the effort to keep a straight face. Karen was going down in flames, and she didn't even realize it yet. But the absolute peak of the evening happened when she tried to gain support from the HOA lawyer, Mr. Bennett. Karen turned to him, her eyes wild with hope. Surely you can do something about this. Mr. Bennett, who had been silently suffering through this entire ordeal, finally looked up from his phone, sighed, and said, Karen, you do know that's a fake lawsuit, right? The entire room went silent. Karen froze. What? She whispered. Mr. Bennett shrugged. It's not real. It has no legal standing. The firm listed on the letter doesn't exist. It's a prank. Karen's entire body stiffened. Her eyes twitched violently as the realization hit her like a freight train. And then, in the most glorious moment of all, she let out a blood-curdling screech, grabbed her petition, and stormed out of the meeting like a cartoon villain. The second the door slammed shut behind her, the entire room erupted into laughter. I thought Mr. Wilkes was going to collapse from how hard he was laughing. Greg clapped me on the back, still wheezing. Kid, I don't know who pulled that prank, but I hope they run for HOA president someday. I smirked, sipping my lemonade. This was the greatest night of my life. After the legendary HOA meeting disaster, Karen disappeared for 3 days. People whispered about it in the group chat. Tom, has anyone seen Karen? Mrs. Delgado, I think she's in hiding. Greg, prank war's over, boys. She took the L. But then, on the 4th day, Karen reemerged, and she was angrier than ever. I knew this because the next morning, I woke up to find a single sheet of paper taped to my front door, a cease and desist letter. From Karen herself. I had to sit down from laughing so hard. She had actually Googled how to write a legal notice, formatted it like a real document, and signed it with her own name. It had gems like, "You are hereby ordered to refrain from engaging in malicious mischief and fraudulent litigation schemes. Failure to comply will result in formal legal action, which may include community service or neighborhood expulsion. I, Karen Redacted, have consulted reputable sources including online legal forums and am fully prepared to pursue justice." This was the greatest thing I had ever seen. I carefully removed the letter, framed it, and hung it on my wall. And then I went outside, set up my lemonade stand again, and smiled as Karen peeked through her blinds, glaring daggers at me. She knew. She had lost the battle. And she would never recover from it. Karen had been humiliated. Her fake lawsuit panic had turned her into the neighborhood's biggest joke. Her petition to protect the community from lemonade-related litigation had failed spectacularly, and her attempt to rally the HOA had exploded in her face. She had lost. But instead of backing down, instead of accepting her glorious defeat with a shred of dignity, Karen did what Karens do best. She doubled down. She wasn't just going to let me have my lemonade stand. She wasn't just going to let me exist peacefully. No, she was going to war. And her first act of vengeance? Calling the health department on me. I had just finished setting up my stand for the day. Freshly made lemonade, a bright new sign that read, Karen's favorite illegal beverage, $1, and a little tip jar that had already started filling up, when I saw the car pull up. At first, I thought it was just some random guy, but then I saw the logo on the side of the vehicle, County Health Inspection Division. And standing right behind the inspector, Karen, smirking. I watched as the inspector, an exhausted-looking man in his 50s who had clearly been dragged into the dumbest situation of his career, stepped out of the car, clipboard in hand. "Afternoon," he said, barely masking his irritation. "We got a complaint about an unlicensed food vendor operating on public property." I grinned. Oh? You mean my dastardly crime syndicate? The inspector blinked at me. Clearly, he hadn't been briefed on the fact that Karen had called him out over a 12-year-old with a lemonade stand. I glanced at Karen, who was standing off to the side, arms crossed, radiating pure smugness. This was her moment. Her revenge. She actually thought this was going to take me down. I turned back to the inspector. So what's the protocol here? Are you going to raid my stand? Confiscate my lemonade? Slap me with a fine for excessive use of lemons? He sighed, flipping through his clipboard. Look, kid, I just have to check if you're violating any health codes. Be my guest, I said, gesturing to my extremely basic operation. He glanced at my plastic pitcher of store-bought lemonade mix, the disposable cups, and the fact that I was literally selling pre-made powder mixed with water. Then he sighed again, turned to Karen, and said the greatest words ever spoken. This doesn't count as a food service operation. Karen's smirk vanished. What? She squawked. The inspector pinched the bridge of his nose. This is a kid with a folding table and some lemonade mix. There's no kitchen, no prepared food, no perishable ingredients. Karen floundered, eyes darting between me and the inspector like she couldn't comprehend the absolute betrayal of reality. But it's still a business. It's unlicensed. It's not regulated by the health department, he interrupted flatly. Then, in an absolute power move, he turned back to me and pulled out a $1 bill. I'll take a cup, he said. Karen gasped so hard I thought she was going to pass out. I poured him the most satisfying cup of lemonade in human history, and as he took a sip, nodded in approval, and walked back to his car without another word. Karen let out a shriek of pure, unfiltered rage. Karen had been defeated yet again. But instead of learning her lesson, she upped the stakes. That night, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Greg, HOA emergency meeting. Karen's freaking out. Mrs. Delgado, oh, this is going to be good. Tom, she said, this has gone too far. What does that even mean? Me. Guess I'll find out. So, with a big bowl of popcorn and a front row seat to suburban chaos, I strolled over to the community center for what was about to be the greatest showdown in neighborhood history. The second I walked in, I saw her. Karen was standing at the front of the room, papers in her hands, eyes wild with rage, looking like a woman on the verge of either a breakdown or a villainous monologue. The HOA president, Mr. Wilkes, looked like he had aged 10 years in one afternoon. Karen, he said, already exhausted, what is the emergency? Karen slammed her papers onto the table. We need to ban lemonade stands in this neighborhood. The entire room went silent. Then, from the back, Greg burst out laughing. Karen's eye twitched violently. This isn't a joke, she shrieked. I have been harassed, my reputation has been tarnished, and now this child is openly mocking me. I smiled, giving her a little wave. She glared daggers at me before dramatically pulling out a folder and holding it up. I have compiled a legal case proving that lemonade stands are a threat to our neighborhood's order and safety. Mr. Wilkes rubbed his temples. Karen, I have photographic evidence, she continued, holding up blurry pictures of my lemonade stand like it was a crime scene. I have witness testimonials. Translation. She wrote her own complaints and signed them herself. And I have a petition demanding that we permanently outlaw all unauthorized beverage sales on this street. She looked around the room expecting applause. Instead, she got silence. Then, finally, Mrs. Delgado sighed and muttered, Karen, for the love of God, sit down. Karen gasped like she had been stabbed. You're taking his side? I'm taking the side of sanity, Mrs. Delgado shot back. It's lemonade, Karen. Let it go. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Mr. Wilkes picked up the petition, glanced at it once, then dropped it into the trash. This meeting is over, he announced. And just like that, Karen had been officially dismissed. The room erupted into cheers. Greg clapped me on the back, Tom bought me a soda from the vending machine, and Mrs. Delgado whispered, If you ever run for HOA president, you have my vote. Karen, meanwhile, sat fuming in the corner, her face red with embarrassment, her neighborhood dominance shattered forever. And as I walked out of that meeting, sipping my completely legal lemonade, I knew Karen had just suffered the greatest defeat of her entire life. Karen never recovered from Lemonade Gate. She stopped complaining about my stand. She stopped filing HOA reports. She even avoided eye contact when I waved at her. But the best part? The next weekend, Greg set up a grilling station in his driveway with a massive sign that read, "Hot dogs and lemonade, $1, sponsored by the HOA president." Karen didn't show her face once. Karen had lost every battle. Her fake lawsuit paranoia had made her a laughingstock. Her health department stunt had backfired spectacularly. Her HOA meltdown had officially destroyed any shred of power she had left in the neighborhood. And now? Now she was a ghost. No more HOA complaints. No more Karen lurking behind curtains waiting to pounce. No more petty wars against innocent lemonade stands. For the first time since she cursed this neighborhood with her presence, Karen was finally silent. And yet, something in my gut told me that she wasn't done. Because people like Karen don't just accept defeat. They plot, they scheme, they wait for the perfect moment to make their final desperate move. And sure enough, Karen had one last trick up her sleeve. It happened 2 weeks after the great HOA disaster of Lemonade Gate. By then, the entire neighborhood had moved on. Greg was still selling hot dogs and lemonade out of his driveway. Mrs. Delgado had started bringing out lawn chairs to enjoy the Karen-free weather, and I had expanded my lemonade empire with a brand new menu that included pink lemonade and an exclusive Karen's Tears flavor, which was just regular lemonade with extra sugar. But the name sold out instantly. Everything was perfect. Until Karen snapped. I should have seen the warning signs. The way she had been watching me from her window, a storm of rage brewing in her eyes. The way her trash bins started slamming harder than usual every time she put them out. The way she had vanished from the HOA group chat, only to suddenly return with a cryptic message that read, "Enjoy your little victory while you can." But I didn't take it seriously. Because Karen had lost. What else could she possibly do? Answer: attempt the single most unhinged act of sabotage the neighborhood had ever seen. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of shuffling. At first I thought it was just a raccoon. But then I heard it. A faint, unhinged muttering. I crept to my window, peeked outside, and nearly screamed. Because there, in the dead of night, was Karen, dressed in all black, creeping toward my lemonade stand like some kind of suburban ninja. And in her hands, a giant bucket of water. I watched, too stunned to react, as she raised the bucket and dumped it all over my lemonade stand, completely soaking everything. Then, in the most Karen move imaginable, she dropped the empty bucket, turned, and sprinted back to her house like a criminal escaping the scene of the crime. I just stood there, processing. Did Karen just commit a lemonade stand massacre at 2 a.m? Oh, she was desperate, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. If Karen wanted to escalate this into full-blown warfare, then fine, I'd finish it. So, the next morning, I put my final plan into motion. Step 1, security footage. Unbeknownst to Karen, my family had a doorbell camera that just so happened to catch everything. Step 2, public humiliation. I printed screenshots from the footage, frame by frame, showing Karen dumping water on my lemonade stand like a deranged gremlin. Then, I plastered those images everywhere. The neighborhood bulletin board, the HOA meeting flyer, the local Facebook group, Greg's hot dog stand menu. He added a new combo called the Karen's Midnight Special, a hot dog with a side of extra salty lemonade. Step 3, the final cherry on top. I drafted one last fake legal notice, but this time, it was personal. The document was titled, Notice of HOA Disciplinary Action Against Karen Last Name, and it detailed a formal investigation into the destruction of private property, a potential fine of $500 for illicit beverage interference, a court hearing scheduled for whenever Karen gets a life, and then I personally delivered it to Karen's mailbox and waited. The next morning, the neighborhood erupted into chaos. Karen had seen the letter. She had seen the security footage plastered everywhere, and she was losing her absolute mind. Witnesses say she ran outside in her bathrobe, screaming about how this was defamation and how she was going to call her lawyer, only for Greg to casually ask, "The same lawyer who told you the last lawsuit was fake?" Karen froze, realized she had no escape, and then she did the unthinkable. She marched straight to the HOA office and resigned from the board. The entire neighborhood cheered. Greg broke out his speaker system and played Celebration by Kool and the Gang. Mrs. Delgado handed out cookies, and Karen went inside her house and never came out again. Karen didn't move away, but she was never the same again. She stopped complaining, stopped harassing people, stopped calling the cops over nonsense. Her power was gone, and every time she stepped outside, people smirked at her, reminded her of the midnight lemonade incident, and sometimes even ordered a Karen's Tears lemonade just for fun. She had officially been dethroned. And the neighborhood? It had never been happier. Months later, as I was packing up my lemonade stand for the season, Greg walked over with a smirk. "You know," he said, "I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and I've never seen Karen shut up before." I grinned. Guess she finally met her match. Greg chuckled, then handed me a brand new sign. I unrolled it, reading the words out loud. "Lemonade, $1. Special thanks to Karen for making this possible." I laughed. The war was over. The neighborhood was free. And Karen would never mess with a lemonade stand again.